Welcome back to Between the Covers, y'all. The podcast where passion meets pages, and a good book always finds its voice. I'm your host, Shirley, and this week it's just me behind the mic. Don's feeling a little under the weather, so send her some good vibes. We miss her already, but the show must go on. Today, we're diving into Chapter 3 of Dark Prince by Christine Feehan. And let me tell you, things are getting good. The connection between Mikhail and Raymond is deepening, but there are mysteries. You might want to grab a blanket, a cup of tea, or maybe something a little stronger. We're about to get cozy. Inside the library, Raven felt fear slam into her, the emotion beating in her head, swamping her, driving out the heavy, trance-like cobwebs. Someone was distraught, crying, feeling pain as sharp as a knife. She staggered to her feet, clutched at the back of a chair, images pushed in. A young woman with pale white skin, a large stake protruding from her chest, blood running in rivers, her head detached from her body, something sickening placed in her mouth, a ritual killing, symbolic, a warning of others to come, a serial killer, here in this land of peace. Raven gagged, her hands going to cover her ears, as if she could somehow stop the images pouring into her mind. For a moment, she couldn't breathe, didn't want to breathe. She just wanted it to end. Wildly, she looked around, saw a door to her right leading in the opposite direction from the overwhelming emotions. Blindly, she stumbled to her feet, weak, disoriented, and dizzy. She staggered out of the library, needing to get some fresh air, desperate to get away from the horror the group in the other room had witnessed, away from the details of a murder that were so vivid in the minds of the newcomers. Their fear and anger was a living thing. They were animals wounded and ready to tear and rend in retaliation. Why were people so ugly, so violent? She had no answer, and she no longer expected one. She had taken several steps down a long hall when a figure emerged from the shadows. He was a little younger than Mikhail, thinner, with glittering eyes and wavy chestnut hair. His smile was taunting and held menace as he reached for her. An unforeseen force hit the stranger square in the chest, knocking him backward and slamming him into the wall. Mikhail loomed up, a dark, malevolent shadow. He towered over Raven as he protectively thrust her behind him. This time a throaty growl was a beast's roar of challenge. Raven could feel the terrible rage in Mikhail. Raged, mixed with grief. His emotions so intense they beat at the air itself. If it weren't for the wall, she might have fallen. But she leaned hard against it and reached out to touch Mikhail's arm. Her fingers curled halfway around the thickness of his wrist, a tiny deterrent to the violence swirling within him. She felt the tension running through him as if it were alive. There was a collective, audible gasp. Raven realized she was the center of the group's attention. There was one woman and four men, including the one who was the object of Mikhail's wrath. All eyes were on her fingers circling his wrist, as if she had committed some terrible criminal act. Mikhail's larger body moved to shield her completely from their scrutiny. He made no attempt to shake off her hand. If anything, he moved his body protectively, backing her further into the wall so that he was pressing against her, obscuring their vision of her. She's under my protection. A declaration, a challenge, a promise of quick, savage retribution. As we all are, Mikhail, the woman appeased softly. Raven swayed. Only the walls were holding her up. Vibrations of rage and grief were beating at her until she wanted to scream. She made a sound, a single thread-like sound of objection. Mikhail turned to her at once, his arms sweeping around her, enveloping her. Guard your thoughts and emotions, he hissed at the others. She's very sensitive. I will escort her to the inn and return to discuss this disturbing news. Raven had no real chance to see the others before he was striding past them, taking her with him to the small car waiting in the garage. She smiled tiredly, her head resting against his shoulder. You don't seem like you belong in this car, Mikhail. Your views on women are so archaic. In a former life, you must have been lord of the castle. He glanced at her quickly. His gaze slid over the paleness of her face, dwelt on the mark on her neck, visible through the long mane of her hair. In truth, he hadn't meant to leave a mark, but now it was there, his brand of ownership, and he was glad. I'm going to help you sleep tonight. He made it a statement. Who are those people? She asked, because she knew he didn't want her to ask. She was very tired, even dizzy. She rubbed at her head and wished that for once in her life she was normal. He probably thought she was the fainting type. There was a short silence. He sighed heavily. My family. She knew he spoke the truth, yet he didn't. Why would someone do such a terrible thing? She turned her face up to his. Do they expect you to track this killer? To stop him? There was raw pain in her voice. Pain for him. Worry. His grief was sharp, edged with guilt and the need for violence. He turned her question over in his mind. She then knew one of his people had been killed. She probably had picked the details out of someone's head. The worry and pain was for him. There was no condemnation, simply worry. Mikhail felt the tension ease from his body, felt warmth curl in his stomach. I will try to keep you as far from this mess as possible, little one. No one worried about him, not his state of mind or his health. No one thought to feel for him. Something inside him seemed to soften and melt. She was wrapping herself inside him, deep, somewhere he needed her. Perhaps we shouldn't see each other for a few days. I've never been so tired in my life. She tried to give him a gracious way out. Raven looked down at her hands. She wanted to give herself a way out, too. She had never felt so close to anyone, so comfortable, as if she had known him forever, yet was terrified that he would take her over. And I don't think your family was thrilled to see an American with you. We're too explosive together, she finished ruefully. Don't try to leave me, Raven. My car drew up in front of the inn. I hold what is mine, and make no mistake, you are mine. That was both a warning and a plea. He had no time for soft words. He wanted to give pretty words to her. God knew she deserved them. But the others were waiting, and his responsibilities weighed heavily on him. She raised her hand to the line of his jaw, rubbing gently. You're so used to having your own way. There was a smile in her voice. I can go to sleep all by myself, Mikhail. I've been doing it for years. You need to sleep untroubled, undisturbed, deeply. What you saw tonight will haunt you. If I do not help you, his thumb stroked across her lower lip, I could remove the memory if you wished. Raven could see he wanted to do it, believed it would be best for her. She could see it was difficult to ask her to make a decision. No, thank you, Mikhail, she murmured demurely. I think I will keep all of my memories, good and bad. She kissed his chin, slid across the seat to the door. You know, I'm not a porcelain doll. I won't break because I see something I shouldn't. I've chased serial killers before. She smiled at him, her eyes sad. He shackled her wrist in an unbreakable grip, and it almost destroyed you. Not this time. Her lashes swept down, hiding her expression. That's not your decision. If others persuaded him to use his talents to chase the insane, evil killers in the world, she would not leave him alone. How could she? You're not nearly as afraid of me as you should be, he growled. She flashed him another smile, tugging at her wrist to remind him to release her. I think you know what's between us would be worth nothing if you forced me to do your will in everything. He held her captive for a heartbeat longer, his dark, dangerous eyes moving possessively over her fragile face. She was so strong-willed, but then she had to be to do what she did. She was afraid, but she looked him in the eyes and stood up to him. Chasing killers made her ill, brought her to the brink of madness, but she did it time and time again. He was still a shadow in her mind. He read her determination to help him, her fear of him, and his incredible powers. But she would not leave him to face this horrible killer alone. He wanted to keep her with him, safe in his lair. Almost reverently, Mikhail trailed his fingers down her cheek. Go, before I change my mind, he ordered abruptly, releasing her. Again she hesitated. I'm so sorry. I know you knew and cared about the woman murdered. If there's anything I can do, Mikhail, please, know I will for you. She leaned in again and brushed another kiss on his temple. Raven walked away from him slowly, overcome the dizziness that had taken hold of her. And she was careful to walk straight, not wanting him to know. She felt as if her body was lead, that every movement was difficult. She walked with her head up and kept her mind purposely blank. Mikhail watched her enter the inn. He saw her hand go up to her head and rub at her temple. and then go to the nape of her neck. She was still dizzy from his taking her blood that had been childish beneath him. Yet he couldn't stop himself. Now she was paying for it. Her head ached from the bombardment of emotions, his included. All of his people would have to be more careful to shield their minds. Mikhail unfolded his large frame from the vehicle and moved to the shadows, his senses flaring out to tell him he was alone. He took to the form of mist. In the heavy fog, it was unnoticeable, and he could easily seep beneath her unsecured window. He watched her as she sank onto the bed. Her face was pale, her eyes haunted. She swept her mane of hair back, touching his mark, as if it ached. It took her a few minutes to kick off her shoes, as if the task was too great. Mikhail waited for her to fling herself face down, fully clothed on the bed. You will sleep. He gave the order forcefully, expected her compliance as he slipped inside the room. Mikhail. His name echoed in his head, soft and drowsy, with a hint of amusement. Somehow I knew you would just have to have your way. She didn't fight it. She went under willingly, a smile curving her soft mouth. Mikhail undressed her and slid her slender body beneath the covers. He safeguarded the door, a powerful spell guaranteed to keep even the strongest of his own people out, let alone pathetic mortal assassins. He secured the windows and provided the same safeguards at every possible entry point. Very gently, he brushed his lips across her forehead and then reached down to touch his brand on her neck before leaving her. Once out of her room, he settled on the railing in the form of a bird, his wings out, his eyes surveying the street below him. The village was small. His was one of the few cars used. Most everyone else had carts drawn by horses. The residents were good people. The outlying area was mainly populated by farmers. Someone had come into their village and committed a murder. He took a breath and let it out. He would find them, and he would kill them. On that thought, he dissolved into mist and streamed back to his car, anxious to get home and talk with the others. The 5 Carpathians waiting for him fell silent when he entered his home. Celeste smiled tentatively and pressed a protective hand against the child lying in her womb. Is she all right, Mikhail? He nodded abruptly, curiously grateful for her concern. No one would question him, yet his behavior was completely out of character for him. He got right to the point. How did the assassins find Noel unprotected? The others looked at one another. Mikhail had drilled it into them never to forget the smallest details regarding their safety, but over the years it was so easy to forget, to slip up. Noelle had her baby only 2 months ago. She was so tired all the time, Celeste tried to excuse the slip. And Rand, where is he? Why did he leave his exhausted wife unprotected while she slept? Mikhail asked softly. Dangerously. Byron, the man who had been in such trouble earlier, stirred uncomfortably. You know how Rand is. always after the women. He took the child to Celeste and went out hunting, leaving my sister alone and unprotected. He obviously forgot to provide Noelle with the proper safeguards. Mikhail's disgust was all too evident. Where is he? The four Carpathians looked at one another, reluctant to give up the information. Mikhail had every reason to despise Rand. All of them knew Rand had a sickness, a need for William, a rare but incurable disease in their society. Celeste's life mate, Eric, answered grimly. He was crazy, Mikhail. It took all of us to subdue him. But he sleeps now. The child is with him, deep in the ground. The healing will do them good. We could not afford to lose Noelle. Mikhail pushed grief away. It was not the time to feel it. You are certain the child is safe? We have lost a few beneath the earth. It is even dangerous now for our women to try and give birth underground. He had forbidden the once common practice, but they had lost so many, and new ideas to protect the babies were all he could think of to try. The child does well beneath the ground, Celeste affirmed. I checked on him myself. Eric, can you keep Rand under control? I will not have him running wild while I hunt these assassins. I think you should talk to him, Eric answered honestly. The guilt is making him crazy. He nearly turned on us. Mikhail's teeth flashed, a white menace. Show of the predator. His answer was a dark promise of unrelenting retaliation. He turned away from them, looking out the window into the night, not daring to look at his own reflection. He might want to blame and hate Rand, but in truth, his sister's death was squarely on his shoulders. Vlad, where's Eleanor? She's at risk, heavy with child. We must protect her, as we will Celeste, Mikhail decreed. Vlad's life mate was conspicuously absent. We cannot afford to lose any of our women, and certainly not their children. She is so close to term, I was worried about her traveling. Vlad sighed heavily. She is safe and well guarded for the moment, but I think this war is starting again. Mikhail tapped a finger on the small table near the chessboard. Perhaps it is significant that we have 3 of our women giving birth for the first time in a decade. Our children are few and far between. If the assassins somehow have gained knowledge of our women's condition, they will be afraid we are multiplying, growing strong again. Mikhail shot the most muscular of the men a quick glance. Jacques, you have no life mate to encumber you. There was a faint trace of affection in his voice, affection he could never feel or show before, and maybe wasn't aware anyone else knew of. Jacques was his brother. Neither does Byron. You two will get word to the others. Lay low. Feed only in the deepest cover. Sleep deep within the ground. And always use the most powerful safeguards. We must watch our women and get them to safety, especially those who are with child. Eleanor must remain out of sight, Vlad. Celeste, neither of you must draw attention to yourselves in any way. If necessary, your life mates will hunt for you. For how long, Mikhail? Celeste's eyes were shadowed, and her face tear-stained. How long must we live like this? Until I find and dispense justice to the assassins. There was a fierce, savage note in his voice. All of you have become soft, mixing so much with mortals. You are forgetting the gifts that could save your lives. He reprimanded them harshly. My woman is immortal, yet she knew of your presence before you knew of hers. She felt your unguarded emotions, knew of the assassins through your thoughts. There is no excuse for that. How can this be? Eric dared to ask. No mortal has such power. She is telepathic and very strong in her gift. She will be here often. She will be protected, as will all of our women. The others exchanged bewildered, confused looks. According to the legend, only their strongest members might be able to convert a mortal. It simply wasn't done. It was far too risky. It had been tried centuries earlier, when the ranks of their women had been depleted and the men were without hope. But no one dared try it anymore. Most of them believed it was a myth made up to keep their males from losing their souls. Mikhail was unreadable, implacable. His judgment never questioned throughout the centuries. He settled arguments and protected them. He hunted the males who had chosen to turn vampire, dangerous to mortals and immortals alike. Now this? A mortal woman? They were shocked, and it showed. It was no small thing to call Raven his woman. It was the same as calling her his life mate, decreeing she was under his protection, put her under the protection of all Carpathians. They were obligated to put the life of Mikhail's woman before their own. If Mikhail said she was under his protection, he meant it. He never said anything he didn't mean. And if she was harmed, the penalty would be death. Mikhail was a savage, merciless, and unrelenting enemy. Mikhail felt the weight of his responsibility for Noel's death. He had known of Rand's illness, his weakness for women. Mikhail had objected to the union, but he hadn't forbidden it, as he should have. Rand was not Noel's true life mate. Chemistry would never allow a true mate to cheat on his woman. Noelle, his beautiful sister, so young and vibrant, lost to them forever. She had been headstrong, wanting Rand because he was handsome, not because her soul called to his. In truth, although he never allowed himself to think about it, Noelle had been just as ill as Rand. Power corrupted, and one had to always be careful not to allow such a thing to happen. Rand and Noelle had lied, but he had known they were lying. Ultimately, it had been his responsibility. Rand continued to try to find emotion by being with other women, and Noelle had grown into a bitter, dangerous woman. She must have died instantly, or Mikhail would have felt it. Even deep in his sleep, Rand should have never had the care of one of their women. Mikhail had thought that in time each would find their true life mate, but Noelle only grew more dangerous, and Rand worse, in his promiscuous behavior. It was impossible for Rand to feel anything with the women he bedded, yet he continued, almost as if it was a punishment for Noel's tight hold on him. Mikhail closed his eyes for a moment, allowing the reality of Noel's senseless murder to sweep over him. The loss was intolerable, his grief wild and intense, mixed with ice-cold rage and deadly resolve. He bowed his head. 3 blood-red tears made their way unchecked down his face. His sister, the youngest of their women. It was his fault. Mikhail felt the stirring in his head. Warmth, comfort, as if arms had stolen around him. Mikhail, do you need me? Raven's voice was drowsy, husky, worried. He was shocked. His command had been strong, far stronger than anything he had ever used on a human. Yet his sorrow had penetrated her hypnotic-induced sleep. He glanced around him, took in the faces of his companions. None of them had picked up the mental contact. It meant that, as groggy as she was, Raven was able to focus, channel, and send directly to him without any spillage. It was a skill few of his people had bothered to accomplish. So complacent were they that humans could not tune into them. Mikhail, this time Raven's voice was stronger, alarmed. Are you all right? I'll come to you. Sleep, little one. I'm upset, but unharmed, he reassured, reinforcing his command with the tone of his voice. I can help. There is no need this night. Sleep. I will feel much better knowing you are safe and getting much needed rest. Be well, Mikhail, she whispered softly, succumbing to his power. Mikhail gave his attention to those awaiting his orders. Send Rand to me tomorrow. The child cannot stay with him. Deirdre lost another child a couple decades ago. She still mourns her many losses. The child will be taken to her. Tiernan will guard them carefully. He is aware that Deirdre is close to leaving this world. The many sorrows have grown too much for her to bear. If he grows suspicious of anyone, tell him to send out a call immediately, as you should. Do not wait to find out if the threat is real or imagined. It is better to be safe. No one is to use a mental link until we know whether one of our adversaries possesses the same power as my woman does. The shock on their faces was complete. None of them considered a human capable of that kind of power and discipline. Mikhail, are you certain this woman is not one of them? She could be a threat to us. Eric ventured the suggestion cautiously, even as Celeste's fingers dug warningly into his arm. Mikhail's dark eyes narrowed slightly. Do you believe I have grown lazy, bloated with my own power? Do you think so little of me that I could be in her mind and not recognize a threat to us? I warn you, I'm willing to step down as your leader, but I'm not willing to withdraw my protection of her. If any of you wish to harm her, know that you will deal with me. Do you wish me to pass on the mantle of leadership? I weary of my duties and responsibilities. Mikhail! Byron's voice was a sharp protest. The others voiced quick, alarmed denials, like frightened children. Jacques was the only one who stood silently, one hip lazily resting against the wall, regarding Mikhail with a secret, mocking half smile. Mikhail ignored him. It is nearly sunrise. All of you, go to ground. Use every safeguard possible. When you awaken, check around your dwelling. Feel for intruders. Do not overlook the slightest incident. We must stay in close communication and watch each other. Mikhail, the first year is so crucial. Mikhail, the first year is so critical. So many of our children do not survive. Celeste's fingers were twisting nervously within her husband's hand. I'm not sure Deirdre could bear another loss. Mikhail's smile was gentle. She will guard the child as no other, and Tenin will be twice as watchful as any other. He has been trying to get Deirdre to conceive, and she has refused. At least this way, her arms will not be empty. And she will long for another child, Celeste said angrily. If our race is to continue, we must have children. As much as I would like to provide them, it is only our women who can produce such a miracle. It is heartbreaking to lose so many, Mikhail, Celeste pointed out. For all of us, Celeste. His tone was final, and no one dared to argue or question. His authority, absolute. His rage and grief beyond boundaries. Not only had Rand failed to protect Noelle, the young, beautiful, vibrant woman, but her life had been lost because of some sadistic game Rand and Noelle had played together. Mikhail silently vowed that he would never again allow a woman's impassioned pleas or tears to overrule his judgment. He knew that he was every bit as responsible as Rand for Noelle's fate. The rage and loathing he felt was just as potent, directed at himself. Raven woke slowly, in a dense fog, layers and layers of it. Somehow she knew she wasn't supposed to wake, but nevertheless, it was imperative she do so. She pried her eyes open and turned her head toward the window. Sunlight was streaming in. She pushed herself into a sitting position, the covers sliding away to expose her bare skin. Mikhail, she whispered aloud, you take altogether too many liberties. She reached out to him automatically, as if she could not deny herself that need. Sensing he was asleep, she withdrew. The slight touch was enough. He was safe. Raven felt different, happy even. She could talk to someone, touch someone. Never mind that it was a bit like sitting on the back of a hungry tiger. The freedom to relax in another's presence was a joy. Mikhail had heavy responsibilities. She didn't know who he was, only that he was someone important. Obviously, he was comfortable with his talents, unlike Raven, who still felt like she was some kind of freak of nature. She wanted to be more like he was, confident, not caring what others thought. She knew very little of Romanian life. The rural populations were poor and superstitious, yet they were a friendly people and truly artistic. Mikhail was different. She had heard of Carpathians, not gypsies, but a people who were well educated, had money, and lived deep in the mountains and forests by choice. Was Mikhail their leader? Was that why he was so arrogant and aloof? The shower felt good on her body, rinsing away the heavy, groggy feeling. She dressed, she dressed carefully in jeans, a turtleneck, and a sweater. Even in the sunlight, it was cold in the mountains, and she intended to go exploring. Her neck throbbed and burned for a moment. She peeled back her top to examine the wound. It was a strange mark, like a teenager's love bite, but more intense. She blushed at the memory of how he put it there. Did the man have to be sexy on top of everything else? And she could learn so much from him. She noticed that he was able to shield himself from the ever present bombardment of emotions all the time. That would be such a miracle. To be able to simply sit in the middle of a crowded room and not feel anything but her own emotions. Raven pulled on her hiking shoes. A murder in this place. It was sacrilege. The villagers must be frightened. As she passed through the doorway, she felt a curious shifting in the air. It felt as if she had to push through some unseen force. Mikhail again? Trying to lock her in? No. If he was capable of such a thing, the locks would stop her. Most likely he was protecting her, locking others out. With his protective nature, he might have felt the need after hearing of the murder of that poor woman. The thought of him taking the time to protect and aid her made her feel cherished. Even more, torn by grief and rage at the senseless, hideous murder, Mikhail had still helped her to go to sleep. She couldn't remember anyone ever doing such a kindness for her. It was 3 in the afternoon, well past lunch, but too soon for dinner, and Raven was hungry. In the kitchen, the innkeeper obligingly fixed her a picnic dinner. Not once did the woman mention a murder. Indeed, she seemed totally oblivious to any such news. Raven found herself reluctant to broach the subject. It was strange. The innkeeper was so friendly and engaging. She even talked of Mikhail, a longtime friend of whom she spoke very highly. Yet Raven could not bring herself to say a single word about the murder and what it meant to Mikhail. Outside, she shrugged into her backpack. She couldn't sense the horror of murder anywhere. No one at the inn, no one in the street, seemed unduly upset. Puzzled, she looked up and down the street. Life went on as usual. She couldn't have been wrong. The images had been strong, the grief wild and very real. The images of the murder itself were very detailed, unlike anything her imagination could conjure up. Miss Whitney! It is Whitney, isn't it? A feminine voice called to her from several feet away. Margaret Summers hastened toward her, anxiety on her face. She was in her late 60s, frail, with gray hair, and a down-to-earth, sensible way of dressing. My dear, you're so very pale this morning. We were all so afraid for your safety. That young man carrying you off the way he did was very intimidating. Raven laughed softly. He does have a flair for drama, doesn't he? I suppose he can be intimidating, although he's an old friend, and I suppose I'm used to him. He's over anxious about my health. Believe me, Miss Summers, he watches over me very carefully. He really is a respectable businessman. Ask anyone in the village. Are you ill, dear? Margaret asked solicitously, moving closer so that Raven felt threatened by the woman moving into her personal space. She avoided physical contact as much as she could. Recovering, Raven said firmly, hoping it was true. I've seen you before. Margaret sounded excited. You're that extraordinary young woman who helped the police catch that murdering fiend in San Diego a month or so ago. What in the world would you be doing here of all places? Raven rubbed her forehead with the heel of her palm. That type of work is very draining, Miss Summers. It sometimes makes me ill. It was a very long chase, and I needed to get away. I wanted to go somewhere remote and beautiful, somewhere people didn't recognize me and point me out like I'm a freak of nature. The Carpathian Mountains are beautiful. I can hike, sit quietly, and let the wind blow all of the memories of a sick mind out of my head. Oh, my dear. Margaret had put out her hand in concern. Raven sidestepped quickly. I'm sorry. It bothers me to touch people after I follow a demented mind. Please understand. Margaret nodded. Of course, although I noticed your young man thought nothing of touching you. Raven smiled, shrugging as casually as possible, eyeing the sky for the lightning that might strike her for lying so much. I'm so used to him. I didn't think about it with him. He's bossy. He's really good to me. We've known each other a while. You see, Mikhail travels quite a bit. The lies rolled easily off her tongue. I don't want anyone to know about me, Miss Summers. I dislike publicity and need solitude right now. Please, don't tell anyone who I am. Of course not, dear. But do you think it's safe to go wandering off by yourself? There are wild animals roaming these parts. Mikhail accompanies me on my little jaunts, and I certainly don't go poking around in the wilds at night. Oh, Margaret looked mollified. Mikhail Dobrinsky. Everyone talks of him. I told you, he's overprotective. Actually, he likes the innkeeper's cooking, she confided with a laugh, holding up the picnic basket. I'd better get going or I'll be late. Margaret stepped aside. Do be careful, dear. Raven gave a friendly wave and sauntered unhurriedly along the path that led through the woods, up the footpath into the mountains. Why had she felt compelled to lie? She liked her solitude and had never felt the need to justify herself to anyone before. For some reason, she did not want to discuss Mikhail's life with anyone, least of all Margaret Summers. The woman seemed too interested in him. It wasn't anything she said. It was in her eyes and voice. She could feel Margaret Summers watching her curiously until the path made an abrupt turn and the leaves swallowed her up. Raven shook her head sadly. She was becoming such a recluse, not wanting to be close to anyone, not even a sweet older woman worried about her safety. Raven, Wait up! She closed her eyes against the intrusion. Where was the peaceful serenity of her remote wilderness? By the time Jacob caught up with her, she had managed to plaster a smile on her face. Jacob, I'm glad you recovered from that horrible choking spell last night. It was lucky the waiter knew the Heimlich maneuver. Jacob scowled. I didn't choke on a piece of meat, he said defensively, as if she accused him of bad table manners. Everyone thinks so, but it wasn't that. Really, the way the waiter grabbed you. Her voice trailed off. Well, you didn't stick around long enough to find out what happened, he accused sulkingly, his brows drawing together. You just let that Neanderthal carry you off. Jacob, she said gently, you don't know me. You know nothing about me or my life. For all you know, that man could be my husband. I was very ill last night. I'm sorry I didn't stay. But once I could see you were fine, I didn't think it would be appropriate to throw up all over the dining room. How do you know that man? Jacob demanded jealously. The locals say he's the most powerful man in the region. He's wealthy, owns all the petroleum rights, which means he bribes the government here. Quite the businessman, very high powered. How would you meet a man like that? He was crowding close to her, and Raven was suddenly all too aware of how alone they were, how secluded their surroundings. He had a spoiled, petulant look, twisting his boyish good looks. He wasn't touching her, but she was close enough to see into his twisted mind. She sensed something else, a kind of sick excitement in his guilty thoughts. She knew she was a big part of his perverse fantasies. Jacob was a rich boy thinking he could have any new toy he wanted. Raven felt a stirring in her mind. Raven, you fear for your safety? Mikhail was heavy with sleep, fighting his way up through the layers to the surface. Now she was worried. Mikhail was a question mark in her mind. She didn't know what he would do, only that he felt protective toward her. For herself, for Mikhail, for Jacob, she needed to make Jacob understand that she wanted no part of him. I can handle this, she sent a sharp reassurance. Jacob, she said with a firm schoolmarm tone, I think you should leave and go back to the inn. I'm not the kind of woman to be bullied by your attitude. This is harassment, and I'll have no compulsion about registering a complaint with the local police or whatever they're called. She held her breath. Deep inside her mind, she could feel Mikhail, still like a predator. Fine, Raven. Sell yourself to the highest bidder like some whore. Try to find yourself a rich husband. He'll use you and dump you. That's what men like Dobrinsky do. The two of you deserve one another. And don't come crying to me when he leaves you pregnant and alone, Jacob shouted. He spat out the last additional ugly words and stomped away. Raven let out her breath slowly, thankfully. See? She forced laughter into her thoughts. I took care of the problem all by my little feminine self. Amazing, isn't it? From the other side of the grove of trees, out of her sight, Jacob suddenly screamed in terror. The sound fading to a thin wail. The roar of an enraged bear mingled with Jacob's second scream. Something heavy crashed through the underbrush in the opposite direction of Raven. She felt Mikhail's laughter, low, amused, very male. Very funny, Mikhail. Jacob was broadcasting fear, but not pain. You have a questionable sense of humor. I need sleep. Quit getting into trouble, woman. If you wouldn't stay up all night, you wouldn't need to sleep the day away, she reprimanded. How do you get work done? A computer, he said with a note of pride in his voice. A computer? So you're one of the lucky few. Yes, it takes up the entire desk, but it's quite handy. Now, for certain, she knew he was bragging. She found herself laughing at the thought of him with a computer. He didn't seem to belong in an era with cars and computers. He seemed more like the villagers with their carts and horses. Yet he knew more of the modern world than she did. Go back to sleep, you big baby. I can handle things just fine. Thank you very much. Without any great big he-man to protect me. I would much prefer that you return to the safety of the inn until I rise. There was the merest hint of command in his voice. He was trying to soften his manner with her, and she found herself smiling at his efforts. That's not going to happen, so learn to live with it. American women are very difficult. She continued on her way up the mountain, his laughter still playing softly in her head. She allowed the stillness of nature to seep into her mind. The birds sang to one another softly. The wind whispered through the trees. There were flowers of all colors carpeting the meadow, lifting their petals to the sky. Raven climbed higher, finding peace in her solitude. She perched on a craggy boulder up above a meadow surrounded by the forest of thick trees. She ate her lunch and lay back, reveling in her surroundings. And that's all for chapter 3. Ooh, y'all, that chapter was something else. The way Mikhail keeps walking that line between dangerous and devoted. Lord, and Raven, I'm loving how strong she is. How much she challenges him, even when she doesn't understand what she's really up against. What stood out to you in this chapter? I want to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment or DM me on any of the social medias. And if you're listening on Spotify, hit that Q&A box right episode. Let's talk about that moment. You know, the one when Mikhail really lets his feelings show? Woo! And hey, if you're enjoying this story as much as I am, make sure you're following us on your favorite podcast platform and share us with a friend who loves paranormal romance. Next week, we're planning to pick up the pace with a double chapter read, chapters 4 and 5. If Dawn's feeling better by then, but if not, I'll hold it down for both of us again. Either way, you won't want to miss it. Thanks again for listening to Between the Covers. I know life gets busy, but showing up for stories, especially the spicy, emotional, unforgettable ones, that's what we do here. Stay warm, stay curious, and remember, sometimes the best love stories are just a page away.